I'm Heather Ferguson, and you have found a Sonar Moment.
I'm a hippie,
Yeah.
corporate hippie.
We're aware of the risks, but we're willing to ignore them for the moment.
I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room.
That a complaint is actually a request.
It's the Sonar Moment, a monthly interview with CEOs from the Pacific Northwest. We're here at the beautiful Alex Goulden Hall in Victoria, Canada, and this is the Sonar Moment Holiday Special. With me today are two men who have more than enough experience in management. Richard Wolfe is the Francis G. Winspear Fellow for Strategy at the Gustavson School of Business at the University of Victoria. And Peter Ciceri is a retired CEO, formerly with Compaq Canada and Custom House, and the former chairman of Sierra Wireless. Peter's now a clinical counselor, a registered clinical counselor that is, and counsels CEOs. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So I wanted to just start out, I was thinking about how we would do this, how we would go back and take a look at what other people have said and maybe get both of you to comment on it. You, Richard, would know what the academic literature is all about. And you, Peter, you've actually been there. You've done it in at least 3 different companies, probably more. Yeah. So I wanted to get your ideas on this. So I thought, well, how are we going to do this? Let's divide this up. So let's talk about culture first. Organizational culture. We've had a number of people talk about that. That actually seems to be a really big part of what being a CEO is all about. Would you say that?
A number of your CEOs do talk about the importance of culture and our values as an important part of culture. And one individual that comes to mind for sure is Sage. And,
I remember that.
Yeah. Sage talks about values, how important values are to the organization and to herself. And
are you talking about finding your true north?
Yeah, she talks about finding your true north, and I find that a very powerful segment.
Well, you bring up a very good point about Sage, Richard. Let's take a look at Sage's clip and see what she said.
It does come back to core values, my true north of what I feel is okay, what matters to me, what makes me want to get up every morning and go to work. Yeah. And I work hard, and my family has to sacrifice for it, and they have to believe in what I'm doing as well.
I mean, I think that values, sort of bring a company together. And, it's how you create the values. You have to do this in a very sort of inclusive, meaningful way for people to sort of even to come together in that process. And then, once you have these values, which is really going to be indicative of and emblematic of what the company is, then you have to make sure that people all follow them and that they are embedded in the company, that they're part of the fabric of the company, and they determine basically how a company works. And getting back to, maybe a couple of the clips and a couple of the CEOs, they embody those values themselves, and so corporate culture does really start at the top, and in the shadow of the leader, so goes the company, and you talk about people like Sage as an example, or Tish Hill, or other people. You can see that they have that kind of infectious, energetic personality, and sort of how they come across, their values, their personal values. You talk about the true north. People find that, and that becomes, as I say, part and parcel of the company and its corporate culture and its culture. So I think that those people are important.
I go back to Collins and Porras, and they talk about vision and missions and how those terms are used so broadly without people really having a good understanding of what they mean. So when we talk about values, we could talk about, Collins and Porras talk about, a vision has 4 elements. And it's very helpful for the leader, I believe, to think about when they work on a mission statement or a value statement or a vision statement, do they really have those 4 elements? And one of them is, what are your core values? Yeah. I think if you really embed them, as Peter said, into how you really act as a leader and as a role model, I think having a framework like that helps you embed or incorporate values into how you think about your organization.
So many organizations just have this thing written on the wall. And very often the actions of the leadership and the actions of people within the corporation are at odds with what is on the wall.
Yeah.
You know, day to day, how do you get it going?
You see that, by the way, you see that way too often.
Yeah.
You know, it's this school of, you know, do what I say, not as I do, just doesn't fly in successful companies for to build, you know, sustainable value. You know, those values, people have to be held accountable on a daily basis for those things. That really sets the sort of the compass for the company, the moral or the ethical compass for the company. You know, in performance reviews, they have to be, you know, the values have to be brought out, and people have to be held accountable to those. A good leader will hold themselves accountable as well. And so for me, as an example, when I was with companies, I'm not perfect, and I'm going to screw up a couple of times, you know, and you know, do I come clean with that? Do I hold myself accountable? What did I learn from that, and how do I go on from a value standpoint? Because that's what people want. They want to be connected to the company, and that's the glue that's going to keep them.
Would you say then that it's true that what we learned in Sunday school really does apply?
I'll have to go back a few years, but I'll go with that, and I suppose so. I mean, you've got to be truthful.
Yeah.
You know, the truth is going to find the light of day, so you may as well drag it in there yourself, kicking and screaming. And
more so even today with, I mean, with technology and social media, and I mean, it's going to come to light. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that Sunday school sort of metaphor or whatever. I just made it up.
But I think it's great. Look, people want to have meaning in their work, right? And they want to have meaning by feeling a connection to their work. And so, you know, these things about truth and about how a company operates, good people are going to be attracted to good companies who govern themselves in that way. And if you want to have, it's all about people. If you want to build the brilliance of an organization, then you have to have those things, those values or whatever they are, that inspire people, connect people, and give meaning for people. And, you know, birds of a feather flock together, and that's exactly the same in good companies and mediocre companies.
We started out talking about corporate culture. Now I want to move on to strategy. Eventually I want to move on to execution. But it does seem that the three, even though we might not think so right away, that the three are linked. I think a lot of those things are, they talk about those in lean startup. Peter Nieforth talked a lot about that. They're big believers in lean startup for TikToking. Let's take a look at his clip and see what he said.
Didn't we learn in school that failure is really bad?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so we're kind of wired that failure is not good. And so lean actually turns that on its head and says, you know what, it's all about failing as quickly as possible, because when you fail, then you know what doesn't work, and then you can make a course correction or adjustment and test something else, and maybe that works. But if that also fails, then you course correct and you go again.
So Peter, when you've been involved in startups, because I know you've been involved in a few, then what have you found?
Well, I think as far as strategy is concerned, we're talking about a couple of different things just in the conversation. One is the formulation of the strategy in terms of where we're going and how we're going to get there, right? And the process in which that's done, with the management team, with the company, with the board of directors, and as I say, determining from a shareholder value standpoint or from a stakeholder value standpoint, depending upon the organization, how are we going to, increase the value of this company as best we possibly can, and you have to have a strategy in order to do that. Where are we going, and how we're going to get there, right? And it can be done lots of different ways, and there are lots of different methods of doing it. I like a blue ocean strategy, where you look at different components of the business and the rest of it. I think that's a very, very good one. What we're also talking about is making strategy a living and breathing part of the business.
Like culture.
And a document that's actually integrated into the business itself. So when you talk about I think the quote that was used, I think by Peter was failing as soon as possible. Was that it?
Yes, yes, that's what he was talking about.
So what he's talking about is this: when you implement a strategy, you have to test it and retest it. And when you test and retest anything, you're testing the validity of it. And if it's not going the way you want it to, then you have to change it, right? And you have to monitor that, and you have to hold people accountable to that, and you have to measure it, and you have to have milestones. So you have to have, from a strategic standpoint, it's part of the business. If something's not working, don't keep beating that dead horse. Move on to something else, and that is working. That is part and parcel of strategy. If you have to reorient something, then you have to do that. But that's also done. That's also done in the proper way with the right sort of process and systems and structure.
How do you know when it's off base?
Yeah.
When does the market tell you, and how does it tell you?
You want to look for consonants. That is your strategy in line with the external environment? You want to look at consistency. Is what you're doing consistent with the values that we spoke about before? Is it feasible with your financial resources, with your human resources, with your technical resources? And does it provide an advantage? All right, so there's 4 questions you want to ask yourself, and if you're waiting for the market to tell you, that's too late.
Yeah, I mean, you asked such a good question, in terms of, how do you know, when you're off base? Well, most of the time, you don't know when you're off base. It's like falling, off of a building, 20 floors, and you get to the 15th floor and you haven't hit the ground yet, and you say, well, things are okay so far. Nothing's going to kill a company like strategy, like ill-placed and poorly implemented and poorly followed strategy. So, I mean, I've been in the tech industry for the last 30 years. Most of the companies that I've worked for are no longer alive today. They've been gone. And the primary reason they've been gone is because of strategy. It's not execution, which is absolutely key. It's not necessarily corporate culture, which is absolutely key. The thing that will kill them fastest is strategy. And the fact that they have formed strategy poorly. Like Compaq Computers is a great example. It's no longer here. It bought 2 companies. It wanted to be more like IBM, right? And it wasn't the right thing for that company. And eventually, the shareholder value plummeted, and it was a good buy for Hewlett-Packard. So that's what happened to Compaq. It was strategy. It wasn't corporate culture, although corporate culture was a big thing. And it wasn't necessarily execution, but execution was a big thing. It was strategy more than anything else. And most of the time, they don't know until they hit the ground.
So with strategy, then, are you damned if you do and damned if you don't? I mean, you've got to have it, but equally, if it's not the right thing, you're not going to find out till it's too late. That just sounds.
I don't think.
No.
The
wrong strategy. Wrong strategy. You have to. I mean, what we're talking about is if you're on the wrong course, if the path is the wrong path, then you want to try and find that out as quickly as possible. That was the point that Peter was making. Yeah. You got to fail as early as possible. And if it's not working, then you have to re-strategize.
Re-strategize.
In the right way, as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction that something didn't necessarily work. It's got to be done properly with discipline and with process, and
Yeah.
And it's related back to the whole issue of culture, and the culture is one of appreciating that we're not all knowing. And that we really do have to take a look at how we're doing and look at the external environment. I mean, I think that we're not damned if we do or damned if we don't. We're damned if we don't. All right?
So I want to just move on and talk a little bit about execution. And we've had a number of guests on the show who've talked about things like that. One of them that really comes to mind is Mark Grambart, just relaying something that had happened the week before at a trade show, and how they were able to leverage or get the most out of meeting people from a sales perspective. Let's take a look at this clip.
We're at a trade show, and many people go to trade shows, and trade shows are a great way to meet a lot of customers. Our trade show was in Las Vegas. A lot of people go to trade shows in Las Vegas and have sort of 2 lives. They have their trade show life and their nightlife. We're maybe not as fun as some companies.
Oh, come on. I don't think that's true at all.
It might be, but we believe that an hour at a trade show is worth 8 hours in a regular day. So what we do is, after the trade show's done, we go back to the room and we respond to every single customer that we met that day with an email. And that email, our marketing team helps us by creating, pre-writing that email that allows us to really have a rich conversation And what happens is on day 2, the person will actually respond and say, hey, I got your email, that's great, I'll come by your booth. And you start having the first 2 or 3 steps of the sales process, where most people wait till they get back the next week and they're looking through their cards trying to remember who this person was, and your memory is just so much better. So that's perhaps hard work. But the teamwork element of it is we go to one room, we sit down as a group, there might be some beer involved, and we just sort of make it a good time and we enjoy it. So you have to work hard and play hard, and we enjoy that.
Peter, what's your sense? I hear that everything falls down on the execution.
Well, if you don't have execution, then everything's certainly going to fall down. And I think what he was speaking about, what Mark was speaking of, is that was a good example of they go to a trade show, they spend money, they're all working together as a team, so the corporate culture is all there. Strategically, the trade show is the right tactic for where they're going. But if they don't have the right execution, then it's all going to fall apart.
Underlying all of this is something which is a thread through the 3 topics that we had today, and that is leadership. You need committed, passionate leadership. And with committed, passionate leadership, then your culture will be consistent with what you want. Your strategy, the leader is going to be very important for your strategy and certainly for execution.
I know that Kyle Vuko was talking about being CEO and how people are seeing him differently. People are looking to him as the CEO. How does that role model, that CEO at the top, actually support and help others to be leaders within their sphere of influence within the company?
Look, a leader is always on show. Everybody's always going to be watching a leader. You're on 24/7, and you all have to. And people want strong leadership, right? And they demand that, and they deserve it. And they want you to work. Right? They want you to get things done. Yeah. They want you to be at the front, and so every day a leader has to execute. Every day a leader has to earn the right, right? And they embody that, and that's absolutely key for them. If they can't be afraid of making mistakes. A really good mantra that I had at one time when I was trying to merge these companies was, a good decision today is better than a perfect decision tomorrow, right? Because I had to get these companies together. We had to, because we had a finite timeline, we had milestones, and we had to get there. And we couldn't do everything perfectly, but we had to make the decisions. Now that's kind of a combination of leadership and also management, because you make the decisions, but then you have to make sure that they're implemented, and you make sure they're implemented by making sure that people feel, that's a key term, feel accountable to those milestones. Yeah. They feel responsible and obligated. They feel a connection to that business, and they're going to execute. So execution is you have to have leadership, you have to have systems and processes, you have to have corporate culture. Yeah? All of these things come into play, when you want to try and drive a business forward as quickly as you possibly can and as efficiently and as effectively as you possibly can.
And that is exactly what we've been driving at today at the Holiday Special in Sonar Moment. I want to thank both of you for coming in and talking about culture and strategy and leadership. I really appreciate it. It's been absolutely a joy, and maybe you'll be our own Brooks and Shields later on.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thanks. Sage Baker, what would you like to see?
I think you guys have done a fantastic job highlighting the entrepreneurial mentality here. I think that innovation and creativity that sits underneath it with some of the organizations would be amazing to see.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, there's this core essence of a person who lives in Victoria that we're trying to decipher and put a word to it. And I think you've hit on it with that entrepreneurial mentality that's there. There's also something around sustainability and innovation and creativity that weaves together here differently than it does in other places. And I think you are finding that in the essence in your interviews, and it would be interesting to go further there.
So Mark, for future Sonar Moments, because I know you watch every month.
Every month.
Every month. I just want to know what you'd like to see.
I'd like to see great background stories on people. It's always interesting to see where people have come from, what they've done, and then also doing a deep dive in one particular area where that CEO has an expertise. Really what I get out of it is, if somebody has a really deep knowledge in one area, diving into that, finding out more about that, and gaining some of that expertise. That's what I think is really great.